Welcome to Arizona Science Center. My name is Jeannie Colton. I'm Guest Experience Assistant Manager. Austine Comarow is an artist who invented a completely new medium, which she will be discussing tonight. Austine attended elementary school in post-World War II Germany, where her father worked for the U.S. government rebuilding the German school system. She then attended high school in Geneva, Switzerland, where her father was acting High Commissioner for Refugees in the United Nations. She skipped her senior year of high school when she was accepted to Swarthmore College, where she majored in Russian language and literature. She later received her MFA from Syracuse University. She lived for several years in Santiago, Chile. Then after marrying her current husband, David, she moved to Nevada in 1976. They lived in San Diego for a short time and then returned to Las Vegas in 1996. Austine and David now divide their time between Las Vegas and Santa Fe. So I would please ask you to join me in welcoming Austine.
Thank you, Jeannie. Nice introduction. And I also want to thank Judy Lightfoot and Tom Marshall for inviting me here to give this talk. The title of this talk was supposed to be Art, Physics, and Mastering the Mysteries of Light. But as I started writing, I realized that that really didn't fully reflect the scope of what I wanted to talk about. And although I'm going to be covering my process and the development of my unusual art form, and a little bit about the elementary physics of polarized light that forms the basis of the work that I do. With your indulgence, I'm changing the title to I Am a Consensus. And so is my art. Don't worry. This will all become clear as I proceed. And if not, there'll be time for questions at the end. Actually, the title is a nod to a book I really enjoyed by Douglas Hofstadter called I Am a Strange Loop, about the nature of consciousness. It's a very interesting inquiry into the nature of our brain's ability to recognize patterns and that relationship and how that relates to personality. He's also the author of the famous Gödel, Escher, Bach. But I'm going to focus on three things: the nature of perception, my understanding of how our minds work, and how that influences the art that I make. So before I get too much further, I want to show you my art. Now you've each got a piece of polarizing filter. That's that little gray material that you're holding. Just take one of those filters and look at either one of these pieces of art. What do you see? And you can rotate it because you can make it change. Where are those colors? Are they in the art panel? Are they in the little square of polarizer? Or are they in your head? Actually, all three are required. This is an example of how what we see is not just a picture of what is out there, but it's an active assembly process involving our bodies and our brains. The ancient Greeks actually conceived of vision as something that you sent your rays out into the world, and that's what caused you to see things. And they had the active part of it right, but they just didn't have the physics quite right. So I think of my art as being a harmonious working together of materials, body, and brain, an agreement of sorts. And that's one version of the consensus that I want to talk about. Just as perception is not just a passive reception of what is out there, creation of an image, as an artist does, is not is not just a simple presentation of something that exists in the artist's brain. It also involves a form of consensus. But before I get too much further, I want to give you a very quick and very simplified explanation of why the colors I use, as opposed to paint, can be made to appear, disappear, and change. Let's start with white light, which for this explanation we'll consider to be waves. And of course, white light contains all the colors of the spectrum. This piece is a piece I call a very minimalist piece. It's called Beneath the Surface, but I'm just going to use it as an example. It's lit from behind. The white light is coming through it. But you can imagine these light waves that are coming through it to be vibrating not like ocean waves in parallel waves. They're more like tangled hair. They're vibrating in all kinds of different directions. You can see the unpolarized light. And then when it passes through the first polarizer at the back of my work, the polarizer is like very fine lines. So the light coming through is then comes out in parallel waves. And then when it passes through the cellulose, which is what I use, it's a clear material. You also have a sample of that. It's a clear material called cellophane, just clear cellophane. And when the light passes through that, it is bent. And different wavelengths are bent different amounts. Now this is a very, I hope there are not too many physicists here because this is a very simplified explanation of how this works. But that's the basis of what I use to create most of the images in my work. And the cellulose bends the light waves, and each wavelength is bent a different amount. So now when it encounters the second polarizing filter, only one wavelength is oriented, is vibrating parallel, and will go through. And then as you rotate that second polarizer, the one that you're holding in your hands when you're looking here, that only allows one particular color to pass through at a time. And as you rotate it, you block that color and let another one come through. So then when you look through the polarizer, the piece that you saw earlier as a minimalist piece, now it doesn't, unfortunately, it doesn't work on slides. It only works on the actual artwork, which is kind of interesting because it means that my work really can't be reproduced very effectively. You have to see the original. You can't experience it, so to speak, in reproduced form. So this is what you see. Okay, consensus. Let's get back to this idea and how that relates to me and to my art. Consensus, among other things, means an agreement among parties. And I'm using it very loosely here to include the light, the materials, the eye, and the brain, all cooperating in agreement to produce the image that appears in my head when I perceive something, but also cooperating to produce the art that I make, because it's not just the receiving of an image that is an active process, but the making of the art also involves a form of consensus. So my art does not just originate in my brain, but in an interaction with and the manipulation of the materials that I use. So there you see I'm working with my materials, actually making that piece that we saw earlier on the screen. But why do I say I am a consensus? I'm just one person. How can I be a consensus? Well, I want to tell you where I got the idea for thinking in terms of being a consensus. People often ask me about my artistic influences, and I'm more likely to mention a scientist than an artist. Although there are certain artists who have influenced me, the idea of focusing on consensus for this presentation came from a talk I attended recently by Dr. David Krakauer, a really interesting cross-discipline thinker from the Santa Fe Institute. His talk was called Cognitive Ubiquity, the Evolution of Intelligence on Earth. He argued that intelligence didn't just suddenly spring forth in humans, but has been evolving on the planet for eons. Even the simplest single-celled organisms exhibit some form of intelligence. And over the ages, simple single-celled organisms learned to cooperate and became multi-celled organisms, which evolved to be ever more complex until we get to be humans. So we really are conglomerations or collectives, if you will, of billions of individual cells that have learned to work together. In fact, one of the most recent articles I read in Science magazine talked about research on individual cells and how it's only at the macro level that they look like they're behaving the same way in any one tissue. They're actually, individual cells react differently to stimuli. I mean, individual cells are very individual, even in our own bodies. The painting over there was one that I did many years ago, which kind of had that sense of we are a consensus of a lot of cells working together. And that's what a human being is. We have a lot of cells that are working together. So these ideas from that talk also jived with two books that I just read. One was called Incognito, The Secret Lives of the Brain by Dr. David Eagleman, a neuroscientist. He points out that the brain is made up of many competing neurons with no one area in charge. There's no little person in the driver's seat in our brains. Our identity is really a consensus of many intelligent cells, and it can change somewhat from day to day. The other book is called The Master and His Emissaries, The Divided Brain and the Making of the Modern World by Ian McGilchrist. It's about the two halves of the brain, each with its separate and competing view of the world. And this is a much more in-depth study of the two hemispheres of the brain than the common cultural, right brain, left brain that is sort of become a cliche. It's a really interesting book. I recommend it. But just to remind you, the right brain sees the whole picture, the gestalt, and the left brain constructs the logical, linear explanation or narrative. And in a whole person, they work together in consensus. So as I thought of myself this way as a group that has to come to consensus, it made total sense that my art was never just one image. I made this piece many years ago showing a self made up of many little cells. I was also fascinated by Dr. Krakauer's thoughts about the nature of intelligence. He mentions three components: representation, inference, and strategy. Representation means making an inner model of reality. Inference is making a leap of thought to reach a conclusion based on evidence, like the ground is wet, it must have rained. And strategy means to form a plan of action. This definition of intelligence is actually shared by many animals. But what sets humans apart is that we have ways of taking our internal representations and making them separate from ourselves. And doing that makes it easier for us to manipulate our representations and make more sophisticated inferences and strategies. In fact, spoken language, we can fix our representations, pin them down, so to speak, even just to ourselves, and it makes thought possible. It allows us to share our representations, inferences, and plans with others. Language also allows us to cooperate and achieve things we couldn't do on our own. It makes consensus possible. And it allows us to teach skills to the next generation. And then with written language, even more possibilities of externalization are possible. And as we externalize our senses, we can contemplate, evaluate, and manipulate. This process is ongoing. And the more we do it, the more our thinking takes place, not just in our heads, but in our whole bodies and in the manipulation of these externalizations that we create. In fact, math, science, and art, these are all ways that we outsource our thinking. So this is all by way of telling you that it relates to the way that I develop my unusual art form. It's not from a theoretical knowledge of physics, but it's from playing with and manipulating the materials, just like the ones that you have in your hands. I would try things, I would rotate them, I would It was just like science. I'd think about, well, what if I did this? What would happen? And then I would try it, and I'd see what would happen. So it was a very empirical kind of way of working. It was definitely a two-way street. It was as if the materials were talking to me. And as I was manipulating them, they were participating and partnering in what it was that I was trying to say. So over the years, I've developed this way of creating two images in one physical space. And I think my sense of partnership with the materials and the fact that I found some unusual materials to work with dates back to my art experiences as a kid. My mother taught art in inner city neighborhoods where they were always trying to find really cheap materials to use for art projects. So I grew up thinking that art could be made from anything, and it didn't just have to come from special materials from an art store. And that I thought that part of the challenge of being an artist was to find new materials and new ways of working with them. In fact, as I got older and became aware of the art world, I realized that other artists were doing this. In fact, I was very much influenced by Robert Rauschenberg's combines, where he put found objects together and created artworks out of them. Of course, then I realized that Picasso had been doing that for many, many years and probably originated the whole idea of creating art out of found objects. You can see I think you can see that there's a little model car that's the head of that baboon. So it was about that time that early on, a physicist showed me that if I put this clear cellophane that I was playing around with, trying to see if it had some potential as an art material, when I put it between a polarized lens from a camera and the pair of polarized sunglasses, I could create color. You see the color? And that's what you've got when you have your two pieces together. I was really fascinated by these jewel-like colors that you could see. And I thought, if I could paint with those materials, it would be so clean, for one thing. I had toddlers at the time. And when I tried to paint with oils, I was always worried that they were going to get into it, and make a mess. And they smelled bad, and they were toxic, and all of that. So that's one of the very pragmatic things that got me going early with these materials. Now, here's a light up here. Take your material and take the clear cellulose and kind of fold it and put it between the two pieces of polarizing filter. And you can find your colors in there. Now, it takes a little work because you have to move everything relative to everything else. You have to maybe fold the cellophane. You might have to crumple it. You might have to turn it one way or the other. It's an active process. This is not a simple thing. You have to find it yourself. And does anybody see color?
Yes.
Good. Everybody see color?
Yes.
Good. That's great. Well, this had me hooked early on. I mean, this was so exciting. I couldn't believe how exciting this was. I thought for sure that everybody in the world must already know about this and be doing this. Now, this was in 1967, and I still don't see too many people doing this, and I really don't know why. Anyway, I was really fascinated by the simplicity of the materials, and this is the very first piece I made. It's made with clear Scotch tape and just, well, you can just imagine. I took the cellophane like you have there, and I put it between two pieces about the size of what I handed out to you, and that's the image that I had. I had to actually tape one of those pieces of polarizer over my eyes so I could use my hands to make the image. And of course, it's very loose and kind of not very well controlled, but at the time, what appealed to me was I could create an image that people could recognize. Now, at the time, most artists were working abstractly. This was in the 60s. And if you were making images of things, you were considered not a serious artist. This was like Sunday painter stuff, you know, hobbyist. And I wanted to be a serious artist, and I love to draw. So I thought, well, if I could just create images with these unusual materials, then, and they have such mysterious properties, maybe the art would be respected and considered avant-garde instead of old hat. So actually, this is another, I just wanted to show you how art was considered to have a sort of progress going on at the time. This is how art history was taught when I was in college. It was like, just like science and technology, you were going to go from realism to impressionism to surrealism to Dada to cubism, and then the ultimate is abstraction. So if you're not doing abstraction, then you're really behind the times. So that was what I was up against. So I thought that if I could bring these two things together, representational imagery and new materials with these surprising characteristics, a new meaning would evolve from this synthesis. In fact, I soon realized that I could actually create two images in the same physical space, which is kind of what I have here. You've got one image that you see to the naked eye, and then the other one that you see through the filter. And this is another example. This is one I did in 1976 when I realized that if I cut the front polarizer into a shape, then if you looked at it through the filter one way, you would see the rose, and if you looked at it the other way, you would see the figure. It was a way of creating what I thought of as being a diptych time rather than space. A diptych is usually considered two images that are displayed together and have some relationship to each other. In fact, here's some examples by other artists, David Sally and Don Eddy. David Sally just has some sort of seemingly unrelated imagery, and Don Eddy also. But in all of these cases, this juxtaposition of images leads to the mind trying to find a relationship there, wanting to explain it. And actually, that's the left brain, according to the Ian McGilchrist, whose book I mentioned earlier. It's the left brain just has to find a reason. You know, what is the meaning of these images? Why are they next to each other? And in my work, it's, what is the relationship between this branch and these chairs? And actually, this piece is called Ghost Ranch. And those chairs are from George O'Keeffe's Ghost Ranch. And I think of it as being maybe me in Georgia, I wish. Anyway, in my work, well, in all work, actually, it's the left brain that wants to make the explanation, but the right brain is just happy to experience the experience, and, that's good too. Most of my very early work, as well as some of my public installations, such as this one in the Boston Museum of Science, require the audience to participate, to look through a viewer like you're doing. Sometimes the viewers are located in space. At the Boston Museum of Science, you can see these people are looking down here in the corner. These people are looking through a filter that is rotating in the space. So they're causing the images up there on the wall to be constantly changing. And this piece, called Human Connections, is 25 by 27 feet. And it's made up of 38 hexagonal light boxes that are about 5 foot from point to point. The juxtaposition of the imagery in here tells the story of the history of communication. And you kind of go from the bottom where you have, I don't think you can see it enough in here, but there's petroglyphs through handprints on the wall and footprints, and then up to tire tracks, and then the first footprint on the moon, and then at the top is an astronaut. And actually, the astronaut, it changes from a Kachina figure to an astronaut as you look through the filter. I only had a very poor picture of it, but that up there is the very topmost part of this, and it's sort of a Kachina figure, and it turns into that astronaut you see over there. And of course, you're going to try to figure out what's the relationship between the astronaut and the Kachina, which I leave up to you. Now, as time went on, my husband helped me develop light boxes with internal motors and rotating polarizers that cause the images to flow from one to the other through all kinds of color transitions. And my left brain wants to explain the relationships of all the symbols in it, but the right brain is just mesmerized and relaxed and just enjoys the color changes and the shape changes. So my inner consensus was resonating with the material consensus of the artwork. So, because you can't really ever pin a piece of my work down. It's always going to be more than one thing. It's several images in one. Now, I also realized that the way I developed this medium of collage and how I chose the images to use is consistent with the idea of consensus. It's a consensus reached between my ideas and the innate properties of the materials. This is an early piece from 1971. And you can see how I've allowed the cellophane sheet to just kind of have a little bit of its own character in there. I liked working, just letting the materials tell me how to use them. So I'm going to show you a couple of more of these early pieces, because every piece that I make from the early days until now is the images are all cut out with a knife. I have no paintbrushes or anything. It's all done with a knife. So this affected the kind of images that I could create. My knife wanted to make smooth, curving shapes without any corners or a lot of tiny details. So you can see that the figures that I was developing are all very smooth in outline. And I've developed some technical expertise over the years, but in the early days, that's all I could handle. But it was also the materials that were helping me create something. And I found myself making these abstract human figures, which seemed expressive to me. And as I shaped their bodies in different ways that the knife could easily cut, you can see that all of this is done, kind of letting the materials tell me what they wanted to do. I could make these figures look joyful or animated or static and monumental. And they were arrived at by the way my knife wanted to move through the material. But they also felt meaningful to me, and I saw them as symbols of my beliefs at the time. The small heads were a protest against what seemed to me to be our overconfidence in our mental abilities. And the large bodies were a reminder that we're still creatures dependent on our Mother Earth. I also saw a relationship to mankind's earliest art. I was really interested in cave painting because I thought that cave paintings were a kind of pre-written language, and I was trying to create images with a similar expressive potential, that I wanted these images to be read with meaning, and I wondered how the cave artists were able to do this without the conventions of written language or the conventions of art history or whatever. As time went on, I developed a lot more control over the colors and shapes, and this led me to create much more realistic imagery. But it still seems like a sort of a partnership between what the materials are able to do and what I'm able to do with them. So my knowledge and values teamed up with the experience and skill that I was evolving helps to determine the imagery. And the final product is never just one thing, but it's alternating, and it's together, it's eliciting a meaning. This piece is called Peaceable Kingdom, which is a homage to an early American primitive painter called Edward Hicks, who did a whole series of paintings by that title. But his paintings always included a lion and a lamb, and mine, I wanted to evoke the idea that we as humans have a responsibility to care for the planet, which we share with so many other inhabitants. Now here's a piece, one of my large commissions in La Cité des Sciences et de l'Industrie in Paris. This involved the viewer in an interaction with the imagery. It's a 64-foot long piece commissioned to commemorate the bicentennial of the French Revolution. And when you look through the filter, she's holding a filter to look through. When you look through the filter, these are two views of two of the panels. And rotating between the two different views, it tells a story. We see the stages in man's ability to lift off the earth. There's the dream of flight from Daedalus. You can see that image over here. And then the other one is a little bit dark. I'm not sure you can see it, but it's the Apollo liftoff. And the thing that frames them both is the Montgolfier brothers' first liftoff of Earth in a balloon that happened right around the time of the French Revolution, which is only 200 years ago. It's kind of an amazing thing that in 200 years we've gone from the first balloon flight to Apollo lifting off of the Earth, going to the moon. And the rest of this installation tells the story of the development of science and technology of the last 2 centuries, with emphasis on the French achievements. It was in Paris. And although I enjoy telling stories of science history like this, I also enjoy creating beautiful imagery of nature that can be healing. And this is a piece that I just created this year for the Gillette Children's Hospital in St. Paul, Minnesota. These pieces, you can see 2 different views of them. They're actually installed in the ceiling right above the bed where the children are either pre or post-op. So when they're supposed to lay flat, they have something to look at in the ceiling. In fact, here you can see how they're slowly changing, and I designed this hoping that the kids can either become just mesmerized by the changing colors or can identify with the different animals or name all the animals that they can find or play some game like that. So this was a fun piece to do. I think it has a lot going on, so hopefully the kid has a lot to look at while they're lying there for some period of time. Now, anytime that you work on commissions, which I've done quite a few of, whether for private client, and I've even done portraits, or for the New Mexico Museum of Natural History, like this 8-foot diameter piece over here, where I had to satisfy the herpetologists, the paleontologists, the botanists, or the piece for the Oregon Refuges headquarters. Whenever you work with other people like that, it really is a product of consensus, and that's a very concrete version of consensus, but it's not a compromise, and that's something that I really want to emphasize. Consensus is a collaboration, and whether it's within yourself or with other people, it's a synergy. It creates a synergy that is an example of the whole being more than the sum of its parts. So I really enjoy this kind of process of working with designers and creating imagery that is in a science museum or in a children's hospital. Now the most recent piece that I've done, I'm going to show you in just a second, is for a very, very different kind of environment. It's actually in a casino. It just opened last week in Las Vegas, my hometown. Here is the piece as it appeared in my studio. It's for the first Margaritaville casino on the Strip in Las Vegas, in the Flamingo Hotel. So if you get to Las Vegas, please go take a look. You can see that I was working with the iconic imagery of Jimmy Buffett songs, and that was a lot of fun. And of course, I was also working with the designers. These three pieces are not actually displayed like that together in the casino. Each one is on a column. And the other three sides of each of the columns that really form the quite a central place in the casino, they have other photographs of the imagery. They didn't quite have the budget to do the artwork on all four sides. But if you stand and watch the ones that are most prominent, you'll see that they're changing. And I'm not sure how many people are noticing that, but you know, you go. So, I am a consensus. I continue to learn from my inner consensus, from the materials themselves, and from other people's reactions to my artwork. But mastery, that's an ongoing process. And the mysteries, they're a moving target and my driving inspiration. So, thank you, and I'd be happy to answer questions if you have any. Anybody have a question? Yes?
Austine, you mentioned earlier in the day when you and I were talking about some new technology that you and your husband have come up with to collapse the box. You want to talk about that a little bit?
The question is about the new technology that has collapsed the light box. Here I can show you. This is kind of deep here. This is the old type of light box. You can see that it's just changing automatically, right? Well, recently we've come up with a new way of making the artwork change without any moving parts. It's a piece of liquid crystal panel behind the artwork, and it's only about 1/8 of an inch thick. It's like what you have in a TV screen or a laptop monitor, only it's one big pixel, so it's changing, it's rotating the polarized light, and I can program it to rotate at whatever speed, or I can stop it. It's great because I can create all this change without the moving parts. And you can see an example of that out in when you came in, that triptych, 3 pieces together that's on an easel out there. That is using this new technology of the liquid crystal that doesn't require any moving parts. Any other questions? Yes? The question is, the really, really big pieces that I'm doing, do I have really big pieces of cellophane, or how am I doing that? Well, actually, the cellophane doesn't have to be big because it's the thing that's cut into lots of little tiny pieces to make all the parts of the image. What does have to be big, though, is the polarizer, because you notice from what you were holding is you have to have a polarizer on either side of your artwork. So if I'm doing a piece that's 8 feet in diameter, like the piece in the Albuquerque Museum of Natural History, polarizer only comes 24 inches wide. So I just splice it into the design. I create a hidden splice. That's how I do it. Yes?
Can you describe the process that you go through to involve another person in the process of reaching consensus on pieces?
Okay. The question is, what is my process for involving another person in the consensus, like when I'm working with a designer on a project? Well, a good example might be with the most recent piece, the Margaritaville project. Actually, everyone is unique. In this case, they had a graphic designer who was in charge of all of the graphics of the casino, and she was just a wonderful resource. She sent me just tons and tons of imagery that is iconic Jimmy Buffett, the the seaplane and the parrot and all of these things, but she didn't tell me what to do with it. She just gave me all this resource material, which was wonderful. So I went through it and I sorted some things out. I did some little thumbnail sketches, and you do everything by email these days. It's so great. I never met her. She's in Florida. And I just emailed my little sketches, and then she kind of marked them up and said, you know, this really doesn't fit as well into, you know, the Jimmy Buffett thing. They like the palm trees to be, you know, more curved than that. And sure, okay, curve the palm trees, you know. And then it went back and forth like that. I mean, I came up with the pelican, and the plane, you know, kind of turns into a pelican. I mean, that's not a Jimmy Buffett image. I mean, he does have pelicans, but, you know, the plane doesn't turn into a pelican. But they were okay with that. She just wanted to make sure that I got the colors of the stripes on the airplane just the right color. So, does that help? Yes?
Does working in this medium limit you in any of the color spectrums?
Does working in this medium limit me in any colors of the spectrum? Well, in a way it does, a little bit, because when you cross two polarizing filters, I don't know, you can take your two polarizing filters and cross them, where you get that dark. It's sort of a dark blue. What that means is that blue is always leaking a little bit into any color that I use. So people often say, why can't you get a red? Well, the reds, I think of them as being red, but they're really magenta, because magenta is a red with a little blue in it. So that's my limitation, is red is always magenta, and everything has a little bit of blue in it. Now, the other thing, you may, I don't think I mentioned this in the talk, but another place you can see my work is almost any sunglass store that sells Maui Jim sunglasses. For the last 15 years, I've been doing all the point of purchase display, not all, but, you know, this kind of work I've been commissioned by Maui Jim to do. I mean, everything from large walls at their trade show booths to tiny little things that you'll see in just about any sunglass store. So look for it, Maui Jim sunglasses. I'll have a little piece from my studio. One more. Yes?
You mentioned that there is a new process. Instead of the piece that we have of yours has a light box on it.
Right.
And it's pretty old, and we've changed, and you've helped us get new parts for it. Is there any way to fit that with this new type of material that you're doing?
The question is, can the older pieces be updated with the new liquid crystal movement technology? Well, if your piece is 12 inches in diameter or smaller, absolutely. But so far, we're only able to get the liquid crystal panels 13 inches square. And I can make bigger things by putting them together in sort of like a window format, which you saw on the Margaritaville video. But we're hopeful that we're still working on it. My collaborator, David Comarow, my husband, is helping me with all of this stuff, so we're working on it.
And when you do perfect it, David, will you have something in a newsletter for us?
Yeah. Go to our website and get on the mailing list.
Will do.
Yes, and in fact, I do have some books out here if you're interested.